Okay.
Oh, that's cool.
So,
О, Жожа в чате, ты что, про гаечку пиздел? Да я просто сидел, читал рэпак и сидел без дела.
Interesting.
yeah, see, I
I like
knew
it
that's
so-
what was going to happen.
I like it so far.
But let me just pull up one little thing here for my own reference because I don't want to leave anything out. If this
Most of
will
these people, I'm like not even going to admit.
and then you just let me know
Oh,
when you
man.
want to get rolling.
Okay. Well, hey, Kent. Can't
Yeah.
unmute. Have you taken a look at Robert's website?
No, I have not. No.
That's okay. Well, here, I'm gonna do something. Kent, I'm gonna make you a co-host
All right.
because I'm gonna need some help. Now, every once in a while there will be somebody who comes up that says that they're trying to join. And if it looks weird, like for instance, I just got one that, yeah, like this one, I'm not. Igor. Like almost all of them, I'm going to remove them.
Okay.
Here's an example.
This and see, so we're not getting into any issues yet. This is what I was talking about, Tariq.
Yeah.
If you just post the link, you're gonna get a bunch of junk.
Yeah. They put out what do they call them, scrapers or something that just pull data from various sources and then link it to their bot farms and what have you.
Oh, I don't know anything about that, but
Yeah. It's just like if you ever wondered how like weird companies get your email address, like if it's ever posted in like a public place, that's how they do it too. They run scripts that pull those from
right.
like, I don't know, I think you call them like APIs or something like that. Just public access info, I guess.
No, but it's
I noticed I ran a previous campaign in 2018. And I noticed after that, because I listed my email, I was getting all kinds of weird stuff coming from that. And then I was just like, no, that's probably it. All right.
well, yeah. So actually, let's start there. You kind of had your initial foray into politics, at least as far as we know. You ran in the Democratic primary in 2018.
Correct. So that was my first real campaign. I had a couple little skirmishes prior to that, as I've always been interested in getting out and doing something along those lines. But the first major one where I got some wide stream appeal, I guess you could say mainstream appeal, would be 2018. I ran in the 2018 Democratic primary for the governor of the state of Kansas, and I ran a fairly progressive campaign. Looking back on it, I will say it was a little more middle of the road than I think I would current me says, wow, what was that guy doing?
That's kind of the impression that I got. I was following that primary at the time, and it wasn't, everybody's, it seemed like all the candidates, their priorities were like not super well defined.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, I'm not even sure what was the main like issue that was discussed amongst the candidates. This was like 4 years ago now. But yeah, I didn't really, it wasn't clear to me at the time, like what your priorities were or what you really wanted to do as governor.
Yeah.
That also could just be my bad memory.
No, there's a little bit of that. I would say of all the candidates, I had probably the most defined, like singular positions, but not really a structured plan. And I think that came across real well, or unfortunately well, I should say, in that primary, because like when singular issues were present, for instance, you were asking what the most talked about issue was. Well, that in 18, that was expanding Medicaid, which
Right.
seems that everybody, I think they just kind of forgot about it. But when I was asked about it, I was a supporter of universal health care back then,
Okay.
but without a real definition.
Okay.
And then when questioned about it, people ask, do you want like some kind of single payer or collect, and I was just like, that's actually a good question. But so, it was, like I said, I was moving into progressive territory in terms of like political theory, but wasn't quite where I needed to be. So then after that, I had made plans to run in 2020. Obviously, well, we lost in 2018, and we actually dropped out to endorse Carl Brewer.
Mhm.
That was a good opportunity because he was kind of, and I'll say it out loud, he was kind of my ticket in, because he had offered me, to work in his campaign and to be considered for further things. And I thought, well, if I can just get in some form or capacity, then I can get things accomplished. So I had made plans to run in 2020 for I think I was going to pursue a state level, I think state Senate maybe. But when the pandemic happened, I kind of put those plans on hold for good reason. I had a bout with COVID. It was not great.
Oh.
Yeah, not good at all. But it.
Извините, а сколько у вас
We're back.
сантиметров, мужчина?
So
Что
moving
ты
on.
смеешься, татар анальный?
Moving
ahead.
on. We're moving into 2021. We're kind of examining, we're ready to run again. Me and people who support me started looking at what we could do to best impact the course of politics, right? And started looking at the US Senate primary. Now, people like me don't usually run for the US Senate. So I thought this is a great opportunity to, one, win. I do believe there's a path to victory. And two, really bring what I call leftist politics into really the mainstream. So we're talking a little farther to the left than what you would consider your normal progressive style politics.
That's what I like to hear.
In the course of that, I started looking, and I'm kind of going into a little bit why I reached out to you guys. Started looking at what some of the failings were in your modern political space. And I was looking at a trend that's been growing of, how do I want to word this? There's a lot of independent third-party groups starting to emerge.
Mm-hmm.
And one, I completely understand. It's very easy to get burned by the duopoly, as they say. And started thinking about what I can do to build both my campaign and give those guys something to at least, at the very least, root for. And I thought, well, what's something that no Democratic candidate ever does is reaches out to these third parties. There's no coalition building. They basically assume roll with it or get rolled over, in a common phrase. So that's when I thought, I was like, well, we do need some real leftist unity. And I do like what the Green Party stands for. And it's actually very solid platform. And and I got to thinking too, because I've met many independent, because in focusing on independence was a big part of my campaign. And heard from many that if they could, they would join the Green Party. So I thought, well, let's reach out to the Greens and see if maybe we can collaborate, or at least, let you guys know that somebody here who at least has a pretty similar platform is running, and, go from there.
Right. And I appreciate that you reached out to us. There is, we can get into this right now. Are you familiar with what the ballot access laws are in Kansas and throughout the United States?
Yeah, they're in my words, they're designed to keep anybody out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know in Kansas, I think to be listed as a major party, you have to have is it one or 2% of the general electorate on a signature ballot? Is that correct? Or is it
So
one?
actually, you have to get equal to 2% to become a minor party.
Oh, okay.
And there's a distinction between minor parties and major parties, and really the only difference is major parties get to have the state funded like primaries that we have in August, and the minor parties, they just basically nominate their own candidates by whatever process they have, which is usually like a convention.
Right. I was actually thinking about that just now as you were saying that. I was like, because the Libertarian Party nominates 2 guys to go to their general assembly, and then they pick a guy from there. Or woman, you know.
I haven't been. I don't know what their exact process is, but basically they can do it however they choose. They just have to tell the Secretary of State who their candidates are by June 1st of the election year. That's really basic.
And then I know that there's a time constraint on the signatures.
Yeah.
Because in the course of, trying to run for governor in 2018, we looked at that running as an independent. And this is actually kind of the same reason we're in the Democratic primary now.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to get on there when you can just pay a fee and then you're good to go.
Right. And do you know what the fee is? Because I'm actually not sure what it is.
It is for Democratic or Republican primaries. It is, you can do a signature ballot if you want to, and I think it's also 1% of your registered base, if I'm not mistaken. But to pay for filing fee, it's 1% of the office's salary for the year, plus like $35 service fee. Yeah, because you just walk in.
That's going to be less than what even a signature drive to get 5,000 signatures. That's going to be less than that. It costs, I think, really the lowest you can find, because if you're going to do a real signature drive, you have to have paid signature gatherers.
Right.
Most likely a combination of paid signature gatherers and some volunteers. But the cheapest you can probably find is like $5 per signature, and just do the math. If you're collecting 5,000 signatures, which you actually collect more than that for an independent campaign.
Yeah, I think I saw on your guys' website, your previous drive, I think you were floating around somewhere you needed 22,000 signatures.
Right. And that was for party recognition. Not for a single candidate, independent candidate, it's 5,000. But a little over 21,000.
Yeah, for that you
within 180 days, 6 months.
Yeah, and I've seen you guys are pushing a bill through the state legislature to loosen up those restrictions.
Yes, and it's the same bill that has been put forward multiple times, and it's the best we've ever done is we got a hearing on it in the House Elections Committee in 2019. That's the furthest we've ever gotten. It's very hard to get bills through the legislature.
Right.
Because
I'm going to make a note of that right now real quick. One of the objectives I had during this primary is to build a kind of like a working class slate of candidates if possible. And I have a few people who are running for state level that have kind of popped up over the last month that have pretty similar platforms to me. They don't go nearly as far.
Okay.
In all honesty, at the advice of my field organizers, I, as they say, took about 10% off the top just because, they believe in me, and they said, you might not talk about certain things just so you can win the primary. But anyways, and I would like, if I can, I'm going to suggest that to them to add that to their platforms, because it's always been astounding to me. Let me just say this. For a party, and you know which one I'm talking about, that claims to represent democracy and often talks about how democracy is under attack, they sure do a lot to oppose the third parties that would otherwise be on their side, you know?
Well, yeah, I mean, the Democratic Party sued to get the Green Party off the ballot in several states, in I think Wisconsin and Montana, I think it was, and a Democrat administration passed a bill in New York, which is probably the worst ballot access law in the country now. The Green Party in New York has to, I'd have to look it up. I think they have to collect like 45,000 signatures in a very short time span. I don't remember what it is. But yeah, that was Andrew Cuomo that did that.
Yeah. Now, you know, and I'm the type of person that, you know, I don't, rhetoric is always going to be a part of politics. I always try to look more at actions, and that guy is something else.
Yeah.
I guess we just forgot about the whole nursing home fiasco during the pandemic. You know, so in politics, I feel like I'm a really different kind of candidate because I'm honest. Oh boy. Now I'm gonna get fired up on Cuomo here. We can't do that. So so yeah, but anyways, yeah, I'm gonna suggest that to them to see if maybe we can, and that's just something that I think that should be a thing anyways, because it's the same thing when Kansas passed, you know, when the teenagers were running for governor as well. And they immediately passed a age restriction. Like, the voters are the ultimate decider.
Yeah.
I don't plus,
think... it was funny because they didn't even have any chance of like being elected governor. You know, like they were like,
it was an interesting deal, you know, and I think there might have been one that I think could have had a chance in the general style, but he probably wasn't going to get past the primary.
Was that the guy that ran in the Democratic primary?
Yeah.
I forget his name, but yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Jack Bergeson.
Oh, Jack Bergeson. Yeah.
I do think in a general election, I think he would have had actually good chance. He's probably the only one though. But I think it was funny.
I'm not so sure, honestly. I'm not so sure.
Yeah.
Laura Kelly had a lot of money. She had a lot. She had a lot of funding.
She came out with institutional funding.
Kobach had a terrible campaign. Like, it was just, I mean, some of the things that were talked about after the election, I just remember there was kind of a sense that his campaign just was not well run at all.
No, and then he had if I'm not mistaken, during the campaign, he had a host of federal lawsuits of all kinds of regulations that, if I'm not mistaken, it might have been after too.
Is that the Fish v. Kobach, the requiring proof of citizenship thing?
Yeah, because the federal judge made him take a class on law or something like that.
Yeah, it was just, and you know, that's not even as bad. I'm an attorney. That's not even as bad as it sounds like. He just did a CLE, a continuing legal education course. Yeah. That's all it was. And lawyers have to do continuing legal education all the time.
Just
but
like doctor
did not know what he was doing.
Stuff, yeah.
It's true.
Yeah, he did run a bad one, and he was also coming off of, he was running on Brownback's coattails, as they say, like a continuation of, and couple that with the massive unpopularity of Brownback, it just was a recipe for failure.
Well,
Maybe. I kind of wonder though, because I like to play the hypothetical game. If that same scenario happened this year, how would that play out?
which scenario?
Like if Kobach ran the same campaign in 22, how does that play out?
Well,
we've seen-
he'd have a better chance, just with it being it's a midterm election after a Democratic president won the presidential election in 2020. You know, the Republicans, just on the trends of how American politics goes, the Republicans have an advantage, and they're probably going to win either the Senate or the House in the federal elections, if not both.
Correct. I agree. Unless I win in Kansas. But we'll see how that goes. But
do you
Yeah.
have you're up against somebody in the Democratic primary, aren't you?
correct. So there's actually 4 people fully registered for the ballot.
Okay.
I'm not sure. There's a gentleman, I think he's from Wichita. I can't really find any info on him. So I don't know what's going on there, if it's just a small thing or if something's building up there that I'm not aware of, because to me, it's still anybody's race. We're actually, in terms of our campaign progress, we are now at a point where we're going to start really touring the state. We're scheduling events throughout. Like I said, I want to go back to one of the reasons I ran was the big one would be, big couple reasons would be, number one, I get tired of feeling like there's nobody that represents me. Like, you don't see a lot of working class guys, just step up and just speak their mind. I think I'm well versed. I can typically hold my own, stumble a little bit here and there, but it is what it is. That, and then just the lack of progress on any issues, anything at all. And so I thought, I examined the primary, looked at the slate, the candidates, and I'll get to the other 2 real quick. Saw there's really not really too much of a progressive or leftist presence. So I said I can fill that void. Did some examining, looked at some numbers, and thought, if I can get through the primary, I said, there's actually a really good shot I can win because I'm different. And I'm basing that off of a theme that I've talked to while talking to independent voters, because I did a little bit of groundwork before I launched. And the number one thing that I find they're looking for is somebody who they perceive as different.
Okay.
And I think that's what propelled Donald Trump to victory in 2016, even though it doesn't match the reality of a situation at all. But he was perceived as this outsider and somebody who was completely different from the political establishment. Like I said, whether the realities mirror that or not, that's a whole nother issue, I suppose, that we have to discuss. But so then I started looking at my policies, and then I said, well, that I base everything I do off of workers' rights. And I guess I was like, well, everybody's a worker. I was like, everybody wants better rights. I was like, let's grow it off that and see what we can do. And then I started adding policy positions and growing it and started writing everything down, because like you were saying before about the 2018 primary, one thing that drives me crazy is when politicians will not state their policy positions.
Yeah, drives me crazy too.
I don't want to know that you support, for instance, to me, it's a buzzword, I suppose. When you say I want more affordable access to healthcare, it's like, well, that doesn't mean anything.
Access.
What is it you want? Do you want to nationalize healthcare? Do you want to build, I'm just spitballing here, do you want to build publicly owned pharmaceutical companies to compete with privately owned pharmaceutical companies? Do you just want to nationalize the pharmaceutical companies? What is your actual plan? And actually, I don't think I've ever addressed pharmaceuticals in my policy platform, and I'm going to add something to that tonight. So anywho, back to the
you have
primary.
On universal rights for all Americans, universal health care, including family planning care.
Yes.
universal housing. That's really important. That's a huge issue.
Yeah, one thing I want to add, because I want to flesh these out, and I haven't really figured out a good way to do it yet. On that universal housing, one of the big ways to tackle that, aside from literally just housing people, is to create, I think there's two ways to do it. One would just be to transfer ownership directly. For instance, if you're renting, just be like, this is your house now, and then deal with the ramifications of that after the fact. The second way would be to build a set of housing or acquire a set of housing that's free from speculators, because that's a lot of what drives that barrier of entry to housing, is people scooping up houses and properties left and right. Because I think I read a statistic one time that was like 50% of all houses are owned by out-of-state investors.
Hedge funds.
Yeah, hedge funds. Actually, during this whole, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the GameStop fiasco of the stock market.
Yeah,
one of
followed it a little.
one of the things that popped up through that ordeal, and it's still ongoing, is that BlackRock was acquiring houses at I think 80% above market value. Like they were just scooping up physical properties everywhere they could. So, and that's kind of the thing. I mean, like when I see that, and that's always been on my mind to fix that, because I do want to flesh those out. I might make it its own page on top of that.
You could get really wonky with that.
Yeah.
It is a question, how do you actually do it? It could be, I mean, the systems that we had in place that are kind of dated now, the housing through the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, the Section 8, and there's all these like different variations. There's public housing authority based housing, project based housing, choice voucher based, but all those places are managed so terribly.
Right.
And I see it in my job. There are property managers at these places that are super picky and finicky with their tenants, and they're just like assholes to their tenants. And they, a lot of the places are run down, and I mean, but it's like one option would be to just revitalize those programs, but I don't know. It might be better to start over with something new. See, the problem is I don't know if just transferring ownership to people who need housing is the best thing to do, because then they're responsible for all the taxes and
upkeep.
Yeah, and we're talking about people. There's so many people that have just been completely left behind. Elderly people, especially, who live on a fixed income, and all they're getting is Social Security, and the amount that they get in Social Security is based on how much they paid into Social Security. Some people are only getting like $700 a month from Social Security. I think it's more common. I've seen around 1,000. Some people get like 2,500. That's a huge problem. But I mean, a lot of these people who that's their income, they're not going to be able to pay, taxes on real estate taxes. They're not going to be able to make repairs on their properties. So
yeah, it's a tough one, because I also thought about that too. But then I always counter it with a public option of some kind of publicly owned building company that would renovate, just to renovate and make it more livable, things like that. A little bit of an idealist in that regard. The practicalities of it warrant their own challenges, but talking about, for instance, on that Social Security issue, one of the things that I want to see is a guaranteed retirement at a decent age and a decent income, just guaranteed.
Okay.
Almost like a UBI, but probably the most practical form would be the expansion of Social Security in a real way. I set my limits. Well, I guess my priority would be, I think everybody should be able to retire at $50,000 a year by the age of 50. And then from there on, if you continue working, that's you, have at it. And that affects none of the other. So that way people will be taken care of and they can enjoy some of the time of their life. Because I know way too many people that are going to be working till they're 75, if not later. And they're just not going to have time to enjoy anything. And I think that is wrong. I really do.
With
another one too, to add into that would be another category of people are people who live on disability.
Okay.
There's some massive adjustments that are needed in that program. Like one of the things I think they can't hold more than $200 in assets at the end of the month. They have to spend all their money.
Yeah, I've heard
something like that.
I've heard it's
might get the
more
number
like what I've heard before is it's something like they can't have more than like $2,000 in their bank account.
2,000.
It like at any time.
Yeah, there's maximum. If they cross the threshold, then they lose their access to the program or something like that.
Hey, my honey's a member of the Green Party. I am not, but I often listen in. But I know about the state of Kansas. So every state varies. So I have a small food bank, and one of the people on our food bank has a lot of mental health issues and has since as a child. He must have worked at one time, so he makes like $1,400 and some off of Social Security benefits, and he has a payee, which means somebody takes care of his pay for him. But I thought, looking at what I could see, that he could make $18,000. And so I'm like, yay, you can get your medication, you can get everything you need. You won't live great, but at least you're taken care of and your medicine will be paid for because you can go on Medicaid. And he can't go on Medicaid because he makes too much money.
State of Kansas.
In the state of Kansas, you can only make $494, and then you have to have what they call a spin down. So anything more than that you make, they have to take that. Yeah, it's kind of confusing. All have to go toward medical cost, and then you have to turn that in. And if you turn it in one time and you didn't spend down enough, then they take it away again. So, and they make it impossible because like he's not in assisted living because he couldn't afford that. So he often does without his medication and everything because he makes too much to be on Medicaid. And so not unless what you're talking about is more like if people go into a care home, then they have to spend down, because I've been through that too, spend down to $2,000. And if they make a penny more than that, then they can't be on Medicaid in the state of Kansas.
Right.
So,
you're talking about Medicaid. We were talking about Social Security, but there's a similar problem in multiple of these programs.
Yeah.
And there's just these weird these programs could just be simplified. And there's all this, like they're designed with, there's this worry we're giving people too much money. If they have too much money, well, we have to cut off the money. And it's like, well, we have the money. What's the new military budget again?
$816 billion, if I'm not mistaken. Could be 863. I know it starts with
how much?
It just came out.
The thing about it, is we could fix, this is one of my points I make somewhere on my website, is a lot of these problems are artificial. Like they are created and they could be fixed tomorrow obviously they would take time, but I like to say they could be fixed tomorrow. We could implement these reforms immediately and then start working on getting them implemented, but they don't. And it comes to like a certain, I don't know, I like to call it like a societal philosophy. and what I've called it the revenge society. Like how dare you need Social Security?
Mm-hmm.
So then they punish you for needing it. Like it's outrageous to me. And it's like I feel like that's kind of one of the things that I base a lot of my policies on too, is like, how do we just help everybody? Like who needs help? And like, I'm not afraid to list, other candidates will be like, that's too much stuff. You can't have that many policy priorities. It's like, everything needs work. Nothing's, as somebody once said in a very massive presidential primary, nothing will fundamentally change. It's like, that's accurate. Nothing has changed. Where are we from 40 years ago or 50 years ago, Ronald Reagan? Like, where are we now? What has gotten better? What's gotten worse? And why don't we act on any of it? It's outrageous to me. And I think one of the reasons that drew me to the Senate primary too was, as we have seen many, many times, one senator can just derail the way a bill can go. So I thought to myself, I was like, if I win that, and I could be wrong on how the Senate works, and feel free to correct me. I'm open to correction. But I was like, let's say we put the Senate in a 50-50 position, and I don't lend support to any bill that doesn't have my stamp of approval. Well, that bill doesn't get passed. We can stop a lot of these terrible things from coming through. And then they have to start coming to me. And then from there, we can work on building more candidates like myself. That's just kind of
you're talking about using leverage.
Yeah.
That this is what Joe Manchin does. This is what and Kristen Sinema has done.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what the more progressive Democrats in the House kind of tried to do and ultimately failed because too many of them gave in because there was the Build Back Better bill, which was the much better bill, had I can't remember all the things that were in it now. And then there was the bipartisan infrastructure bill. And the idea was, well, if you want to pass the bipartisan infrastructure bill, then you have to pass that bill with it as well. And we're not going to vote for the bipartisan infrastructure bill. Well, some of the progressive Democrats just went ahead and voted for the infrastructure bill without a guarantee that the Build Back Better bill was going to pass.
Yeah.
And they was just like, well, you just ended any chance of getting what you wanted.
Right. See, and I do look at that too. And I wonder if in the House, if a lot of it has to do with there's 435 representatives, I think, not including, well, that might be including
that's total.
Yeah. Anywho, because I was thinking DC and Puerto Rico and whatnot, because I know there's a few non-voting.
Oh yeah,
members.
but they're not voting members.
But I think, realistically looking at actual rhetoric and action, I think there's maybe really only 4 real progressives in Congress. They say
I'm just using the term generally.
Yeah. Right. Because I know there was the whole force the vote thing. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that situation at all.
I am.
Yeah, and I don't know if that would have necessarily netted anything out of it. I think it would have been worth trying.
Yeah.
But I don't know if the payoff would have been what people expect it to be. But that's kind of what I mean. I was just, to be the first leftist, and I openly call myself a leftist because a lot of people don't understand what that means. So they don't see much, but for the people who do know, then they know that I'm real. I'm real. I can't be bought. And I was like, people have always said, what would you do if you came into a lot of money from somebody? And I was like, cool, you still deserve a higher minimum wage. I don't, just going through my list, I've, none of these rights or policies have an impact on that, One promise I can say, as I've been thinking about, is I don't want lobbyists in my office.
Mm-hmm.
The only people I want writing bills for me are the ones that I hire to put it into legalese, as they say, to get what I want done.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's kind of just some of my own little political philosophy and why I think me getting in would be an excellent benefit to not only Kansas, but just the whole country. Because these are a lot of things that we just need everywhere.
What if you were elected, I mean, what would your relationship be with the Democratic Party?
I would be one, but I would say it would be more of a professional deal. Because I think the whole point of getting any of this done would be to stand alone. To say, well, I would probably be registered one unless I register back to independent. Because I was an independent for years before 2018. It would be one of those situations where even if they put forward a bill and I didn't like it, I'm blocking it or I'm going to work against it. Like, it has to come to where I am for me to support it.
Okay.
And I'm, one big thing too is it drives me crazy when they sneak amendments in about weird things that have nothing to do with the bill they're trying to pass. Like, I don't know. I don't have any specific examples off the top of my head, but I think they call them riders. That drives me crazy. I hate that. I was like, if we're going to pass an infrastructure bill, it's going to be infrastructure. I don't want 19 other things in there that have nothing to do with infrastructure. Just a little personal preference to me there.
Terry, you have your hand raised.
Thank you. Yes. Robert, I'm sorry, I'm too busy today to be at the meeting. I mean, I'm at the meeting, but I'm not able to do much or say much. However, I cannot let you go before I ask, looking at your website, there's a very fine picture of you, but you're holding an automatic weapon on your shoulder. And what was your intent in presenting an image of our platform, Green Party platform, peace. That's a major tenet of our platform. Semi-automatic weapons are not peaceful.
The reason it's there is because the Second Amendment rights, as they like to say, are important to my platform, but for a different reason than what you would see from your typical right-wing candidate. The reason it's there more is to let other leftists know where I'm at, because within a lot of leftist circles, the right to self-defense is huge. And the reason for that would be is, as we've seen the rise of the reactionary right. People who are prone to violence. And we've seen it in like Texas and Colorado, where what I would describe as right-wing militias have targeted trans farms, for instance, where people go for transitioning and they, commit acts of violence against them or harass them and that kind of thing. So that's really what it is about. I've actually thought about removing that photo, but that's really what it is. It's the right for workers and marginalized people to defend themselves against the incursion of reactionary forces.
My thinking was, I wasn't sure that that's where you were going with it. I'll say me personally, and usually in the Green Party, stuff about Second Amendment rights and whether we want more gun control or not is usually not an issue that's put forward a whole lot. Because I mean, honestly, now of course it's the Green Party. We're very concerned about climate change. We're also very concerned about the working class and a lot of the things that we've been talking about already today. And it's not, I mean, me personally, I think it's fine for people to be able to have guns. But I do think that we should have universal background checks. And last I saw, over 90% of the country agrees with that.
Yeah.
So my thinking is, just the no duh position that most Americans agree with expanding background checks because people are concerned about mass shootings.
Correct.
People are concerned about but the idea now, some people on the left, think we should get rid of guns completely,
Right.
do gun buybacks. It's not going to happen.
No.
It's not going to happen.
It also serves me another purpose is one, from a general election standpoint.
Yeah.
You don't see, I'm just going to say, Democratic candidates stand on that. That's often one of the number one attacks that you see come from the right. So it's also a way for me to signal to voters, if I make it past the primary, that, oh, hey, maybe we should consider this guy because he's different. So the other thing too is you're talking, actually, I'll touch on a couple things that you said. One, I want nothing. I want peace too. If it could be a situation where violence ended tomorrow, great. But we have to work on getting there. And I'm of the belief that all shootings, for instance, are rooted in socio-economic issues. I think a lot of it stems from just the current system that we live in that pushes people to the brink. And I think that's how they act out. So a lot of my other platform, if implemented, would actually reduce a lot of that. For instance, there was a shooting in Wichita a few days ago. It was a gang shooting, if I'm not mistaken. And they're classifying it as a mass shooting, and it's terrible that it happened. Don't get me wrong. But, I can't, when I look at that and see that, I can't help but look as what caused them to get there? What's the actual root cause that brought us to that point? Was it just poor economic situation? Some people call it the social incentive theory, where if you stick the nicest person in a bad situation, eventually they'll be forced to interact with that situation in some capacity. It just kind of, more so for me, mine is more focused on, like I was saying, helping marginalized folks defend themselves, because I have a legitimate concern about the rise of violence from right-wing groups, especially as time goes on, because we're seeing.
Should we somehow try to get law enforcement to try to prioritize dealing with those groups more?
Well, here's the problem with that. And you would assume that would be a path to take, right? But we know that most police departments in the United States have members in these groups.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's tough to say that that's the course of action, because just looking at the current president's Department of Homeland Security and their newest training manual, they list 9 different varieties of leftists as domestic threats and only one variety of right-wing threats.
Mm-hmm.
And it's but we know, but the FBI has said on multiple occasions that right-wing domestic terrorism is the most likely cause of attack in the United States. But they choose to go after people on the left instead of that. So it's a very bad situation, but it doesn't seem like there's a real way out of it without tackling the other economic incentives,
I mean,
I simply want to suggest, Robert, thank you for your thoughtful comments, all of them. And I note that earlier in this conversation, talking about healthcare, and you were busy making yourself notes and said, I'm going to add something to my platform about that. This entire philosophy is not at all communicated in your website. All that is communicated is cool guys have semi-automatic weapons and brandish them. And that is the kind of philosophy that gets mass shooting events in Wichita, Kansas. I'm going to say cool guys carrying assault rifles. I want to be a cool guy like Robert Klingenberg. I'm telling you.
Fair.
And as soon as you carry a gun openly, somebody's going to shoot at you. It's just the way. And then people get hurt.
Yeah, and that's fair criticism. I'll take a look at that and see if I can tweak that up a little bit. because I do want to get the point across. Like that's only one tenet of my 6 groups of platforms. So I don't want that to be the focus. Like we removed the old logo. So yeah, we did. It's now that logo doesn't appear on that website. We had some coding issues where I can't seem to get my PNGs to load correctly on there. But it's a more standard logo. It says Robert Klingenberg, Free Senate, vote August 2nd. Pretty standard stuff.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah.
I don't see.
Yeah, didn't Chris Kobach? Kobach had a twin 50 caliber machine guns on a Jeep.
Mm-hmm.
Campaigned on that.
Yeah,
I think that was part of it.
With that
Badly run campaign.
Yeah, that did happen.
I mean, that was like cartoonish. I mean, yeah, but I'll just say, I mean, some people do. I mean, the way Terry feels about it, some people do. She's not the only one who feels
correct.
Other people are going to have the same feelings that she has. So,
and trust me, I was talking to another person a couple weeks ago, and they were asking me about the same thing. And it's tough to be pro-gun when these things do happen, because
can you all hear me? Everything is cut out for me.
Universal background checks in that light might appeal to a wider base of people who want their gun rights, but they want responsible gun rights and so forth. Switzerland is an example of this.
yes,
that they have a lot of guns in Switzerland. Apparently, is what I've been reading.
I believe it's almost a higher per capita than the U.S.
Yeah, but the munitions are kept separately, and they have periodic training.
Yeah. So, I think on my side, I think I have a national carry program as part of my platform there. And that's kind of what that would entail, some form of universal training system that's accessible, because, for a lot of working class, sometimes those things aren't accessible. For instance, for me, like if I want to go to a range, unless I know somebody out in the country, which I don't, the closest range to me would be an hour and a half away. So, there are these little things that we can add in there to kind of get to that point and that goal where we can really stop those acts of violence.
How has Ukraine situation and all the news media changed people's perception of owning weapons here in this country?
In terms of how it's changed them, that's a good question. I think it adds a point of conversation to the groups of people who talk about the need for weapons against to stand up to what they call a tyrannical government. You don't see, because there's quite a lot of they call them liberal gun owners. I don't see a lot of rhetoric come out of those groups, and if they do, it's close to the same. I think on the left, we see more people talk about the need to not send weapons to Ukraine and get involved in that. So it is kind of interesting. Now, for my own personal thought, I do sort of incline to that point where it just kind of, to me, it kind of shows the ability to defend yourself and how important that can be. But for me, for that point, I think the biggest examples to me were the ranches in Colorado and Texas that I talked about earlier that have had incursions on their land from threatening groups. I think that's more of where I come from.
Yeah, that's where I can see in your candidacy, you could probably be more upfront and brash. Whereas the Democrats kind of have to be guarded in their verbiage, and their policy wishy-washy kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And when you do that, you can drive the issue more that probably needs to be driven in this primary to really push the Democrats to at least come around to really thinking through the issues rather than sticking with some kind of benign party line out there. And yeah, look at your data.
So this is from a poll that was in May 2021. And you can see here, there's strongly support and somewhat support. That's a vast majority, the 66 plus 18 of registered voters, 84% support requiring background checks for all gun purchases. And that includes, if you look at Republican, wait, where is it? Oh yeah, 53% strongly support and 24% somewhat support. So that's a vast majority of Republicans as well. So that's the thing that I'm talking about. I mean, something like that is you know, I mean, that's easy to support, but you know, you don't even have to go any further than that. But I wouldn't make it an up in front issue for the campaign. It's all these other issues are, I feel like they're so much more important.
Yeah, that one there is like I was saying, that one is there. If I get through the primary, that one is there for me to help carry me over the general. Because that's something that, for instance, I'll be running, if I make it through the primary, we'll be competing against Jerry Moran. And that's something I can hit him on in a way that he's never really addressed before. And all of a sudden, not only because, you know, a lot of these priorities, when you generalize them, universal health care, I think 70% of Americans support a new system, or 61 maybe. I might be getting my numbers mixed up. A higher minimum, a majority supports universal, we'll just say canceling student loans. My debt relief program goes a little farther because, you know.
Yeah, I saw that.
But that's a very popular sentiment. You know, all these things are extremely popular. And I think a lot of it, and I think it also serves to drive voter turnout down when people don't talk about these things. And I think that's what helped like Bernie Sanders achieve the level of popularity he did, because he was at least willing to say these things are wrong. Like, this is what we can do to fix it. So I kind of hope to emulate a lot of that. You know, in terms of when I campaign, the workers' rights and universal rights are the ones that I focus on the most, because that's something that I think everybody can agree on, really. And I think it'll help drive people who don't typically vote regularly out to the polls as well, because now, and in a meeting I was with the Lawrence DSA, for instance, I made this point. I said, now they feel like I'm getting something out of this vote because it's more personalized instead of your overall generalizations.
All right. Let me see. Kent, Terry, do either of you have any other important topics that you want to talk about?
I just want to congratulate you, Robert. You're a good, strong speaker. You're highly intelligent. Thank you for your efforts. in transforming the political system.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I was never. I always felt like I always feel like I'm not that good. Like when I go back and listen to them, because I always try to go back and look. And I always feel like I stumble a lot because I always try to take some time to formulate thoughts before I say them. So when you know, it's some of that, you know, you're never happy with the work you create.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, well, thank you too, especially. I'm happy to come out and talk and just go over some of the stuff, you know, and I know we had, you know, in my email, we had talked about maybe some form of collaboration, and I a lot of that comes to me from a place of, like I was saying at the very beginning, you know, as you know, just some kind of left unity, something we don't see, because there's no better tradition than leftist infighting.
Sure.
And you know, we don't necessarily have to discuss any of that now, because I think a support from you guys would be excellent in the general.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really where it would help the most.
Okay.
And I think, you know, I just think it would be unique to see from a Democratic candidate to reach out to other groups and say, hey, I want to collaborate, you know, just like, you know, you're making points about my gun platform. I was like, that's fantastic. I like that. I like being challenged, and I like to see what people have to say. And, you know, I've thought about adding a couple things through the conversation, because, you know, I try to have a little bit of everything for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, it's good just to, you know, talk about all of these issues and kind of, and put it out there. And I'll post this on we've got a really small YouTube channel, but we have a YouTube channel. We can put this on YouTube, and it's you know, it's a good conversation just to have. I mean, what direction do we think this country needs to go in?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of problems that a lot of people have. A lot of people have these same problems, you know?
Oh yeah. It's very common. And then a lot of it is a certain degree of deprogramming when we speak to people, especially me, because it's like, this has always been an issue with leftist messaging. The right wing has figured out how to, and maybe it has to deal with like the idea of like certain populist thinking has no deeper philosophy behind it. They can narrow it down to a simple sentence that's easily consumed, right? So like, what's a good example of that?
Like socialism.
Yeah, that's socialism. Or
communism.
You don't want the government running your healthcare.
Government running healthcare.
You don't want them to come out and help you, whatever. But like for me, it's like when I say like, oh, we need higher wages for everybody. But then they say, what about inflation? Well, inflation is caused by corporate greed. It's not caused by money theory. It's like, but then who's going to pay for it? It's like, well, we'll pay for it. And then you have to go down this chain to help them understand. And then that often gets in the way too, because it's hard to break it down into nice little sound bites. But a lot of it doesn't work without understanding the reasons behind it.
Mm-hmm. Are you getting at modern monetary theory?
A little bit. I started actually getting it. I started researching that a little bit actually a couple of days ago. I happened upon it in a tweet. To my understanding, it's basically the idea that the United States can pay for whatever it wants, whenever it wants, without really any backfire. Is that generalizing it fairly well?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, that's kind of the gist of it. It's not, the United States has its own currency. It's not like the things that the United States pays for and is not like a household budget.
Right.
Where, you know, you can't go over, you know, the amount that you can't spend more than what you take in. And there's a lot of right wingers really want to have a constitutional amendment to require a balanced budget, which would which would kill a lot of people actually.
Yeah, it would destroy everything.
All these things that we've been talking about, the problems with Social Security, problems with Medicaid, there'd be no funding for that stuff at all anymore. So yeah, it would make it a lot worse. But it's just like, you could even argue, the United States government is run more like a business than a household. And guess what? Businesses take out loans.
Mm-hmm.
Businesses run on debt all the time. But it's not like a business either, because businesses don't have their own currency.
Right. And that's another thing I tell people too, is like, it all starts with, to me, this is how I word it too, because in my thought, I take a little different approach, but I think it's accurate. But I always tell people, I always ask people, what makes a dollar a dollar?
Mm.
And it's like, well, the United States government says a dollar is a dollar.
We agree that it's a dollar.
Yeah. And I was like, so that's the fundamental foundation of our money. And that's why inflation isn't caused by what you think it is, that we could pay for all this stuff because a dollar is still a dollar. I said, it comes from profit incentives in every corner of your life. It's like, if it can be monetized, corporations, this is how I word it to sell it to people. Corporations will monetize everything they can. They could monetize the air if you let them. And in some places, I think they are. So that's how I kind of try to break it down for people. But I think it's pretty similar theory.
Yeah. I'll just look at water.
Yeah. Yeah. I need to talk about
all that.
This is one area where I know I'm lacking on in my website. And I've been thinking about this over the last couple of weeks, is environmental stuff. I focused it more on an economic perspective, but I do think I need to add more of that stuff because, we are in the middle of a global pollution crisis. There's microplastics in everything.
Oh, yeah. Well, you might look at, so there is a Green Party candidate who's running for U.S. Senate from North Carolina. His name is Matt Hoh. That's Hoh is spelled H-O-H. You might look him up and take a look at his platform. And he's a really good candidate. He's been on a lot of podcasts. He's been on Crystal Kyle and Friends. He's been on geez, I can't think. He did an event with the Green Party before he was a candidate. That was about Biden's wars, the first 100 days of Biden's presidency. But yeah, you might check out him out and see if that'll give you some other ideas.
Okay.
Or you could also look at the gp.org, the Green Party platform, which Green Party has a absolutely massive platform. It's actually totally ridiculous. It's such a huge platform. Like I haven't read like probably even a quarter of it because it's just so long. It covers so many issues. But yeah, I mean, I would suggest that you look into that stuff.
Okay. Yeah. It's just one of those ones, I chose to focus on a lot of these universal rights and workers' rights. And another area where a lot of candidates fail on is a rural platform.
Mm-hmm.
I think that makes my platform a little unique in that regard too. And but I don't have
Kansas has there's a lot of rural area in Kansas. Yeah. So yeah, I mean that makes sense.
Significant. And then I think but then I even looking through that, because I was looking through and I was like there is some here, like I support green energy, of course. There's that famous article that came out a few months ago or weeks ago, whenever, where they were talking about the new opposition to solar power. was because the price would go negative and they can't monetize it. Like, like that's crazy to me that's a problem.
Mhm.
But there's stuff on here cleaning up and addressing the growing pollution crisis, but I do think it warrants its own section.
Mhm. And I mean, this is the thing there. I mean, the economics and the environmental issues, they really do tie in together. Like, why don't we want, why haven't we done more to, to fight climate change? Because there's not a profit in it,
Right.
Like, I mean, and who are the people that are going to be most hurt by climate change? The poor people and the working class people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and especially, nice thing about Kansas is we're not super exposed to, like, at least as far as I know. I mean, maybe I'm not the person to ask, but we're not, where we are geographically, we're not quite as exposed to what at least initially, what the harshest results of climate change will be. There's not it seems like that we don't get as many tornadoes as we used to. I don't know. But people who live like on a coast or something, and when sea levels rise, I mean, you're a regular working class person and you live near the coast. I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, you're just going to, like, lose.
Yeah. Or I know during, what year was it where we had 5 major hurricanes in the Gulf of Mexico?
Yeah.
Just a handful of years ago.
Yeah.
It's the ocean. A lot of people talk about ocean water temperature as like the big one, because like a big statistic is, I think, what is it, 1 degree of warming of the ocean, it holds 7% more moisture in the air, something along those lines.
Okay.
Because that's what increases the power of a hurricane, because that moisture condenses and then rotates. But there's others too, like the massive temperature swings we see in Kansas. I think
that's true. That's true.
Kansas, the fact that we had a windstorm in December that is technically, they call it a derecho, but I think that's the fancy word for land hurricane.
Oh.
Because it was, I don't know if you guys got it where you were at, but in Salina, it was crazy.
Well, I'm in Lawrence, so no, I don't think we were.
I'm not sure.
Maybe I just don't remember.
I don't know what direction it went. Because we had, like, for about an hour and a half, we had like 100 mile per hour wind, just constant.
Oh.
Yeah, it was wacky. Tore down all kinds of stuff, all kinds of property damage, but that's that's what they categorized it at. It kind of fell along the wayside in the news because we're so used to windy weather, we just kind of wrote it off. But the official categorization was a land hurricane. And shoot, I thought we were going to have one the last couple of days. We had some crazy wind over here.
Mm-hmm.
And so couple that high winds, which I think are typically really caused by masses of air colliding with each other. If I'm not, my climate science is a little lacking. But when those high fires couple them with dry seasons and dry grass, and we got wildfires everywhere. So, that's just my own self-criticism. It's been on my mind for a while to get that clarify that up a little bit.
Well, good. Let's see here. It's almost 2:30. I don't know. Is there anything else that you'd like to tell us about your campaign before we end?
I think we covered a good amount. I guess the big thing would be, if I at least draw even a little bit of it, interest from you guys or your party, just consider throwing some support my way. Right now the biggest thing we're trying to do is build up our social media presence, because we got some big plans on that in the near future.
Okay. Well, let's see here. Your website is robertforsenate.com.
For U.S. Senate, robertforussenate.com.
robertforussenate.com. And you're on Twitter Are you on
Yep.
Facebook?
There is a Facebook page. It'll be under Robert for U.S. Senate as well.
Okay.
And those are the big two that we are really focusing on. I had some others with the intent to use, but it just got a little too out of hand.
Yeah.
Trying to post on 5 different platforms. So we just went ahead and axed those.
Okay.
Because I use Twitter the most because it's the easiest to get on there and throw a quick tidbit out,
Sure.
quick soundbite, and then as the campaign itself grows, we'll use the Facebook more and more.
Okay.
And once I figure out how to get my retweet service to work, my tweets will go directly to Facebook.
Okay.
I used to have a working one, and then it stopped working, so I gotta troubleshoot that.
Okay.
So
You
yeah,
might
and
be
then,
able to get like a, what is it? The Hootsuite?
yeah, I think, and then there's another one too, which I forgot the name of because I had it saved because it's supposed to work really well. Because it'll go to pages as well. It won't just go to your personal platform. It'll go to your pages as well. I got to look up that one, see which one that one is again.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on. It was good to talk to you.
Absolutely.
Well,
thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. I'm sure we'll be in touch and keep in touch about your campaign. And
Absolutely. I'll send some updates here and there if I have something, I'm not sure where everybody's at, but I'll let you know when I'm in the area and stuff. And
well, we've got people we got people in the Wichita area. Our treasurer lives out not too far away from where you are because you're in Salina, right? Mm-hmm. Our treasurer is in Ellsworth County.
Okay.
And I'm in Lawrence. Terry's in Lawrence. And we got some people in the Kansas City area as well.
Lawrence will be huge for the primary for me, and so will Wichita.
Nice.
Those are the big two that we're hitting, along with some of the lesser campaigned in counties.
Good.
So
Good.
yeah, I really do think I wouldn't burn my own money pile for this if I didn't think I had a real shot at getting through the primary. So I think there's some good things ahead, and I want to say too, again, thanks for having me on. I appreciate any chance I can get to speak to anybody. Even if a Republican group wanted me in, I'd still go talk to them.
Oh, good. Yeah, you should. You should at least talk to him. I mean,
because when you sell it to them the right way, they'll agree with you. The statistics show. Yeah, you just gotta keep at it. My policies affect everybody, and I don't want to punish anybody for anything. So yeah, thanks for having me on again. And I'll say that 1,000 times because these opportunities are excellent, and especially I understand the implications of having a Democratic candidate on a Green Party platform. I understand. I'm not ignorant of that. So that knowing that as well makes it that more special to me that you guys were willing to sit down and have a talk with me.
Yeah, it's no problem, man.
So thank you. I'll be in touch if you guys follow me on Twitter. I know this video is going up, so this will be the nice ending bit for people. If you want to follow me on Twitter at Robert for Kansas, that'd be excellent. Facebook, Robert for U.S. Senate, or check out my website, www.robertforussenate.com.
All right. Thanks, Robert.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, everybody.